They say your home is your safe place. But what if the moment you're left alone, it turns into something else? These are three chilling true stories that prove being home alone is anything but safe. When I was 22, I moved into the basement apartment in my parents' house. It was a good way to save money, and I also liked the idea of having some extra privacy. Even though my parents were often out of town, it never really felt private enough. I couldn't even invite friends or dates over without feeling watched. The basement unit was separated from the rest of the house by a stairway with a lockable door. It had an open layout, a small kitchen connected to the living room, and a hallway that led to my bedroom, a bathroom, and a laundry room. There was also a side entrance through the living room. This happened on a weekend when my parents were away. I had invited my friends Anthony and Jay over to hang out, have a few drinks, and watch the hockey game. Since we had the house to ourselves, the music was loud and the drinks were flowing. I wasn't totally drunk, but had a solid buzz by the time the game ended. Because my parents weren't home, I left the door between the basement and the main floor unlocked. I kept drinks in the upstairs fridge. It was larger and just easier. Since both of my friends had been drinking, they decided to crash at my place. The couch in the living room was huge and could easily sleep 3 people. After a long night, I said good night and went to bed. A few hours later, I woke up. It was still dark, probably early morning. I heard footsteps upstairs. I figured it was one of my friends grabbing a drink or looking for water, so I didn't think too much of it. Then, a few minutes later, someone tried turning my bedroom doorknob. Luckily, I always lock my door. Just a habit. I wondered why one of them would be trying to get in, but I was too tired to deal with it. I figured they'd give up if I didn't respond. And they did. I fell back asleep. In the morning, Anthony was already gone. Jay was still on the couch. When I opened the fridge, he stirred awake. I asked him if he tried coming into my room, but he said he didn't think so. He had been pretty drunk and didn't remember much. We went to a deli nearby for coffee and breakfast. Then he left shortly after. I didn't bother asking Anthony. I honestly didn't care that much. I spent most of that Saturday out with other friends and didn't return home until later that night. I was sober by then, but exhausted. So after a quick snack and shower, I got into bed and watched TV for a bit before falling asleep. Just like the night before, I heard noises from above. It sounded like someone walking in the kitchen right above me. I paused the TV and listened, but the sound stopped. I felt uneasy for a few minutes, but eventually told myself it was probably just the house settling. Then, the doorknob turned again. This time, I jumped up instantly. The knob only moved for a moment, just like the previous night. But this time, I also heard a light knock. I didn't say anything. I grabbed my phone and messaged everyone. My family, Anthony, Jay. I hoped one of them would somehow reply and say it was them, even though I knew it wasn't. No one answered. I didn't want to yell or confront whoever was at the door, so I quietly got out of bed, hid near my dresser, and grabbed something heavy, just in case. I stayed there, frozen, for what felt like 10 minutes. No more noise came. Eventually, I dialed 911 and whispered as quietly as I could. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher until the police arrived. I told them to meet me at my bedroom window. Once an officer tapped on it, I handed him the key to the side door. A few moments later, I heard them enter the apartment. They came to my room first. Then we turned on all the lights and searched the basement. It didn't take long. Then we went upstairs. I told the officers which rooms were which. When they entered my parents' bedroom, I heard shouting. I stepped into the hallway and peeked into the room. 2 officers were yelling at someone hiding under the bed. They pulled out a tall, dirty man in a hoodie and shorts. He looked unstable, maybe homeless or mentally ill. When they asked me if I knew him, I said no, absolutely not. The way he glared at me chilled me to the bone. Once they took him outside, I felt a huge wave of relief. They told me that if I or my parents wanted to press charges, we could contact the precinct. But nothing was stolen, and the man was apparently homeless, so my parents didn't pursue it. Later, I wondered if I left the side door unlocked that night when my friends came over. And that's how he got in. Or worse, maybe he'd already been in the house. I've always found comfort in silence. That's what led me to move into a remote cabin in rural upstate New York about 5 years ago, far from the noise and pressure of city life. The cabin itself is large, tucked away in dense woods that stretch endlessly beyond my land. My nearest neighbor is miles away. The only sounds I typically hear are the rustling trees and the occasional call of a bird. It's peace, and I've always embraced it. Fishing has always been a passion of mine. There's a serene lake right behind my home, and I spend most of my time there, casting a line and forgetting the world. Solitude doesn't bother me. In fact, I welcome it. The cabin has a wide deck that overlooks the forest, and most evenings I sit there with a cold drink, watching the sunset melt behind the trees, listening to the forest settle into night. It had always been peaceful, until recently. It began about 2 weeks ago. One night, I was out on the deck, soaking in the darkness, when I heard it, the sharp crack of a twig snapping somewhere deep in the woods. I didn't pay much attention. Maybe a deer, maybe a raccoon. The forest has its sounds, and I'm no stranger to them. But as days passed, those noises became more persistent. At first, it was just leaves shifting or branches breaking. I chalked it up to wildlife. But then one night, I heard something else. Scratching. It came from the side of the cabin, just beneath the spare bedroom window. It was faint, almost cautious. I stood up, heart suddenly alert. Nothing followed. I told myself it must have been a squirrel, but something felt off. That night I locked the doors and went to bed uneasy. The next evening it returned, the scratching. But now it was closer, right outside the spare bedroom window. I froze, heart thudding, ears straining. I pulled the curtain back slightly. Moonlight cast long shadows through the trees. Everything seemed still. No movement, no figure. I sighed, trying to calm myself. Probably a branch, maybe the wind. But the next night, it wasn't just scratching anymore. It was tapping, deliberate, as if someone was trying to get my attention. My heart skipped. I shot up, grabbed a flashlight, and crept through the hallway. At the window, I shined the light out. Nothing. Just empty woods again. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air felt heavy, unnatural. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the floor sent chills up my spine. Each night, the sounds came back. Tap, scratch. Sometimes, even faint whispers from inside the walls. I tried to ignore them, but it became impossible. One night, I had enough. I needed to face it, whatever it was. I convinced myself it was an animal. Maybe something had gotten in. I took a crowbar from the shed, just in case, and headed to the spare room. The room was cold, undisturbed. I hadn't used it in ages. I swept the flashlight across every inch, under the bed, behind furniture. Nothing. I nearly laughed at myself. But then I saw it. The closet door, slightly open. I didn't remember leaving it like that. My gut dropped. I stepped forward and opened the door slowly. Empty, except for something caught in the corner. A scrap of fabric. Dark. Torn. Like a piece of clothing. My breath stopped. Was someone hiding here? Panic rose. I backed out and slammed the door shut, locking it. I needed air. I bolted outside. The forest felt darker than usual, like it was pressing in. I tried to calm my nerves. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was just unraveling. That night, I crashed on the couch with a bat nearby. Nothing happened. Silence. But it was too quiet. The next night, I forced myself to sleep in my bed. I couldn't keep running. But just as I began to drift off, tap, 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 on the window, I jumped up, grabbed the flashlight, and ran to the spare bedroom. I yanked the curtain aside and froze. There was someone, a shadowy figure, just standing there, watching. My blood turned to ice. I spun around in panic. Who was that? Why were they here? No more denial. Someone had been out there and watching me. I ran to the phone, hands trembling, barely able to dial. "Someone's outside my house," I told the dispatcher. "I think they're still here." They said help was on the way. I looked around, grabbed my jacket. But then, creak. From the hallway. Someone was inside. I didn't think. I bolted for the back door, ran into the woods as fast as I could. I didn't look back, just kept running. Eventually, I saw flashing lights. Police. I collapsed behind a tree and watched them approach the house, weapons drawn. I didn't go back. I later called the police to confirm I was safe, but I never returned to that cabin. It still stands deep in the forest, alone. But to me, it no longer feels like home. Even now, I hear the tapping. Whoever was out there, they were waiting for me, and I think they still are. This happened when I was about 15, back in 2008. My parents had gone to a casino for the night, leaving just me and my dog Abby at home. It was around 11 p.m., and I was messaging friends on Instant Messenger and watching videos on YouTube. While typing away, I suddenly heard Abby barking from the living room. I assumed my parents were home, so I waited. But after a minute of nonstop barking and no door opening, I went to check. Abby was barking at the front windows that faced the driveway. It was pitch black outside, and I couldn't see much, but I noticed there was only one car in the driveway. My parents hadn't returned. I figured Abby might have heard a neighbor's car or some loud vehicle passing by, since we lived along a busy road that stayed noisy at night. I returned to my computer, but over the next few minutes, I kept hearing strange noises around the house. Abby would bark, then go quiet, then bark again. Just as I was about to get up to calm her down, I heard what sounded like knocking, or maybe rustling, at the living room door. I nervously walked back, looked out the windows. Nothing. I was too afraid to check the peephole, imagining some creepy face staring back. I made sure the front door was locked and was about to leave the room when loud knocking came from the side door. My heart started racing. Was it my parents locked out? Or was someone trying to break in? Before I could figure it out, I heard the doorknob downstairs being fiddled with. Someone was trying to get into our basement, which was only accessible by walking around the house into the backyard and going under the deck. You'd have to know that door was there, or be really determined. Abby barked louder than ever, running frantically from room to room. It sounded like the basement door was opening. Then everything went silent. I held my breath, paralyzed. Suddenly, Abby dashed down the stairs and started growling like I'd never heard before. Normally a gentle black lab, she now sounded ready to attack. I stood frozen until I realized she'd gone quiet. That's when instinct took over. I called her back upstairs and locked the basement door. Grabbing the house phone, I didn't have a cell yet, I ran to my parents' closet where they kept a gun. I armed myself, ready to call 911. Suddenly, the front door opened. Abby sprinted out. I shouted after her, but then I heard my parents' voices. I rushed to the living room, heart pounding, to find them petting Abby and looking at me, confused. I explained everything. My mom was horrified. My dad grabbed his gun and searched the house top to bottom. Nothing. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next afternoon, someone knocked at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I instinctively hid in another room. My dad answered. It was Uncle Pete, holding an envelope. Uncle Pete was off. He gave everyone the creeps. Nothing criminal, just strange and uncomfortable vibes, even for adults. He was always weird around the kids, especially. I played softball, and his daughter, my cousin, was in a younger league. I used to help her with pitching and fielding. From another room, my mom and I overheard Pete say something like, "I tried to drop this off last night, but no one was home." That's all I heard before my dad slammed the door shut. He came in, furious, and handed me the envelope. Inside was a thank you card and a gift card for helping his daughter. All that terror, and it was him. My dad said he warned Pete never to come back. We didn't see much of him after that. To this day, I'm grateful Abby was there. She likely scared him off. But I still wonder, what was he really planning? Why so late? Why not just call? And what would have happened if he'd gotten inside?